Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the second annual Mount Tam Integration Summit. Really happy to have you here with us. Hope you're having a great day so far. We have a really beautiful presentation for you today and a really gorgeous next 3 days together, celebrating good psychedelic practice together. So thank you all very much for being here with us. My name is Casey Garrett, and I'm the founder of Microdosing for Healing. We're a nationwide community of intentional microdosing participants. I work with beginners to medicine practice all over the country. And one thing everybody asks me is, how do I start? Like, how do I get into this world? I am called to it. It resonates with me so much. I really am interested in working with the medicines, working in the field. Where do I start? There's so much out there. And my answer to everybody is really sit and be with people who are in this work. Every day, day in, day out, there's so many people who have been the heart of this work for many years, underground, behind the scenes, and you're going to meet many of them over the next 3 days. So hope you can be with us all 3 days. You're in for a treat. So many gorgeous people that I love and respect so much. So thank you for being here with us. You're going to learn so much, really soak them up, and enjoy your time here with us. So today I'm super happy to be with 4 really beautiful, dynamic, powerful voices in our space. Our panel is all around bringing an essence of femininity back into our medicine practices, to our communities, to our families, and to our work in the world. So I'm delighted to introduce Jean Johnson. If you guys can give a wave, Becca Evans, Mikaela Valentino, and Robin Alexandra. Welcome, all of you. So I would love to start with Jean, if I may. So Jean, you have been a seeker and a yogini and a meditator, and present day you are with the TAM team leading women's integration circles. So I would love for you to talk a bit about your personal story and how the feminine presence has accompanied you on your healing path, and why it's so important to invite the feminine into our community spaces at this time.
Sure. Thanks so much, Casey. I'm really grateful to be here. Glad that Daniel has this jam every year and we have an opportunity to come together and talk about, as you said, Casey, best practices around using these sacred medicines. I'll do the short version of the way back and spend a little more time with the current version. But, the way back is kind of a typical story of not the best parenting, good intentions, lots of addiction, and just not presence from my parents, and being just a really sensitive little empathic girl, as being, Jean's very moody, she's too sensitive. And so, the shaming began early on for being just exactly who I was. Found my way into substances that took me out of that pain very early on. I always say I did all the stupid drugs when I was young. So I started with alcohol and marijuana and started smoking cigarettes, found my way to cocaine and, all the good stuff early on. Somehow I've had some kind of deeper guardian or wisdom that had me able to get through college, and through a first marriage that wasn't completely supported, but wasn't evil in any way, but just a stepping stone. Found my way into a very good marriage, have had a couple of beautiful daughters, and managed to piece together what looks like a really successful life. I live in a pretty house on a cul-de-sac in a suburb, all the trappings, but I have really suffered my entire adult life with a kind of low-grade depression, struggles with different substances, alcohol, mostly marijuana, and, just kind of, I always say kind of like a little low-grade miserable. And I did the whole Western trip. I did all the antidepressants and the therapy and all that. And after about 20 years, had to raise the white flag on antidepressants. They just weren't working. And I always knew there was something better. There there had to be something better. I describe myself in my little mini bio as like an intrepid self-healer. Found my way to yoga in the early 2000s, and that sustained me. Started teaching yoga, and there's so many beautiful, I live in Marin County, so we have Spirit Rock here. We have these amazing teachers. I've had beautiful meditation teachers. But it wasn't until about 3 years ago, and I call myself just such a typical suburban story. I read Michael Pollan's book. And of course, my first thought when reading, oh, you could do psychedelics to heal, I'm like, legal, like bona fide drugs? Like, yeah, sign me up. I'll take more of that. But once I got down that path, I realized this was something different. My therapist was on board from the beginning. I started to work with ketamine therapy at Polaris in San Francisco. I found a beautiful man to work with there, which is interesting that I would seek out a man, but I obviously chose a man with deep feminine wisdom and a huge heart. And I did ketamine for a few months and realized that while it did a very, very good job of lifting my mood, it wasn't particularly durable. And that's the word that they use. I needed deeper healing. So I found myself an underground guide, another man very deeply rooted in feminine wisdom and compassion and healing and dedication to this work. And I sat with him for about 1.5 years, and we worked with MDMA, we worked with psilocybin, and I worked with my therapist every single week for 1.5 years and worked through all that deep healing. So then, I pop out the other end. I always say I came in here, I did all this work, and I kind of came out up here. And so I still have my normal fluctuations, but I'm operating on a different plane. And then somewhere, I guess about 1.5 years ago, I started dropping into Daniel's Wednesday night circles, which were brilliant and a little masculine. And it might have just been maybe 1 or 2 guys like giving advice that just sounded a little aggro to me. And I reached out to Daniel. I talked to my ketamine therapist. I said, I want to give back. And I'm thinking about a women's integration circle. And he literally jumped out of his seat. He was like, yeah, it's a great idea. So I contacted Daniel. I'm like, I don't know how to start a women's circle, but I think it'd be a cool thing. And he's like, yeah, it would. I'll host you. I think within about a week, I met Robin in a Wednesday circle, and she just popped right out. And we kind of joke. I hold the soccer mom end of the spectrum, and she holds the, been doing this since I was 15, hippie earth mama part of the spectrum. And so we kind of gather everyone in there. And so we've been having these circles now for a little over 1 year. It just felt really important to me to have a safe space for women to talk their truth. Not that men aren't available to hear women's truth. I think they are. After being married for over 25 years, though, I realized I spend a lot of my time with him still educating him. And it's exhausting after a while. And you get a group of women together and you don't have to do any of that. We all just come into the room, we do our ground rules, we meditate, we drop right in, and it gets real sacred real quick. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jean. Robin, you have been in this world for a very, very long time, have a really rich, extensive history with medicine work, and you're very passionate about community and building community. Love for you to talk about your path and your sense of community as you know it, and how incorporating the feminine really heals us as a community.
It does. As Jean said, I have a rich hippie history, and part of that includes women's circles. And when, again, like Jean, also parents not present, not a lot of emotional support. And so in college, I was an art major and started to get involved in different groups that were activists, and came into the feminine space as a feminist, and joined in a women's new moon circle, which I attended for years and years, decade or more in the town that I was living in. and that I found myself living in a community of about 3,000 people in the valley, 1,500 in the town. And it was a village that helped me raise my children. It was a village of women who came together in a sacred space for healing as well as support. And so that sense of community when I was raising my children really stuck with me. And then as I came into my ayahuasca practice, which is about 13 or 14 years now, something like that, we developed again community, a sangha, where it was the same people sitting together. We were sitting here in the United States. And so we had access to each other, and that sense of community with a female lineage. We had a woman come from Peru, and her head facilitator here in the States was also a woman. And so again, that sense of community among women and women with voices and power, and the ability for each of us to lift each other up. And I realized that our society tears women down and divides us as a culture. And I won't go into that any more than saying that. And I kept being drawn towards women who are gathering to lift each other up. And so that has been something that I have focused on in my life. And when I came to California 3 years ago, I had no community, and started reaching out around. And coming from a background of medicine work, I was looking for medicine people and found TAM integration and started developing a community. And Jean's like, hey, let's do a women's circle. And for me, that was a natural progress. What I am finding again and again in these medicine spaces is that so many of us are solo practitioners, and that when we can come together in community, when we can join our heart space, share our journeys and our experiences with each other, that suddenly there is much more fodder for the grist mill, as you know, and that we have the support to navigate that. I really believe that community is going to change the world. Again, patriarchy's had its day, and now balance. Let's, I'm not asking to swing the pendulum all the way the other way. Let's find some balance in our voices. And so when Gina, approached me to do the women's circle for women and people who identify as women, we are a very open group that way, and are inclusive. That seemed like a dream for me. And now that is spinning off into panels like this. And again, getting the information out to women to destigmatize these practices and to connect us with Mother Earth. That is true community, is to connect us with the vibrancy of what our mother gives to us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Becca, in your practice, you have a special passion for working with addictions. As society evolves its understanding of addiction, we're learning the common thread underlying so many disparate addictions is essentially disconnection at its heart, disconnection from ourselves, from our purpose, each other, and the planet. In your work, how have you seen the feminine perspective help people heal from the symptoms of addiction and separation?
Well, I can speak most deeply to my own personal journey with the medicines and healing my addictions, which were mainly chemical. I have a history of IV heroin use and alcoholism. stemming back to my early teens. And what I noticed going into detox facilities, residential treatment centers, very grateful for county funded services that need more funds to provide access. But what I noticed being in those models, very 12-step abstinence only based models, was there was such an emphasis on like fake it till you make it. If it's not working, there's something wrong with you and you're not doing something right. And growing up with a lot of self-enforced perfectionism and feeling inherently defective from a very young age, thanks to parenting, Catholicism, XYZ, right? And being a neurodivergent female, I really struggled with feeling hope, with feeling the why for sobriety, until I had my first child at 21, when I was living in a women's residential treatment home. And that very soon became my why. However, there was still a deep void, I would say, and complete disconnect to who I inherently am and to my inherent goodness. And I really enjoyed Buddhist recovery meetings. I enjoyed and was very grateful to be allowed to attend Native American recovery meetings, because the spirituality and the down-to-earth discussions of what it means to be human and what spirituality is and the different facets of it felt like they spoke to my soul, versus going to most other mainstream recovery meetings where it was a lot of shaming, a lot of if it's not working for you, there's something wrong with you and good luck. And all this was happening while I was in school and then working in the mental health field, in school to be a counselor, and working in the mental health field while still struggling with relapses, which is a clinical term, but a return to addictive use every now and then, due to my own shaky and non-existent foundation of spirituality. I would see such a, it was very disparate of how do we allow people to believe in themselves and not just throw medications on them, have them talk about why they're having cravings, because if they're having cravings, something must be wrong. And then after a certain amount of time, they go and then they come right back so long as their insurance covers another stay. And when I experienced my first intentional high dose psilocybin journey, which by the way, I've grew up in the DIY culture. And so a lot of my own healing has been DIY, right? Here's a bunch of mushrooms, go somewhere in the dark for 6 hours, come out another layer peeled and a deeper understanding of your own soul. So once I experienced that, which was the catalyst. By this time, I was not using IV heroin, but I would return to drinking. I had just had my second child and was dealing with some intense postpartum depression and didn't really have any sort of community, didn't know what integration was, but I came out of it knowing that there was something immensely powerful here. And then going to work and still just having to tell people to just keep going to meetings and keep trying, and sorry if it doesn't work. And so as I found integration communities, as my community grew, as I met others in the space intentionally using these medicines and having such a reverence for spirit, for their own spirits, and providing feedback to others, I came to realize that there was something that was changing in myself at a foundational level for the better, and connecting me to my own spirit and giving me my own framework for spirituality instead of an outside paradigm or religious paradigm that maybe I didn't resonate with, just forced upon me and feeling as though there must be something wrong with me if I can't sit with this. As psilocybin and ayahuasca allowed me to form my own sense of relationship to the spiritual world and to the relational world, and helped me lower my walls of disconnection with others. I have noticed in myself and with those I work with that social anxiety and social disconnection plays a huge role in addiction, because if we can't be okay in ourselves, how are we going to know how we are in relation to others? So healing that has been so transformative and has allowed me to become the mother that I want to be while I'm still human and always learning. I feel that I am so grateful, and I feel so lucky to be where I am now versus the person I may have been had I not found this. And so in my work with others, I support others in building their own framework to these medicines and to what healing means for them. I find change, which is frequently discussed in the addiction treatment industry, the importance of readiness to change. But what does change look like, and how do we come to a state of wanting it and accepting support, unconditional support, in seeking the things that call to us instead of just being given a prescriptive model and then put over there so you can figure it out on your own. So hopefully that answers the question. I kind of touched on a lot of things, but thank you for letting me share. And I just also want to express gratitude for the beautiful women's deep dive that I got to be a part of with Jean and Robin, and holding such a sacred feminine space. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah. And your words resonate with so many. So thank you deeply. Yeah. Yeah. Mikaela, in so many ways, the path of the feminine and entheogenic earth medicines have shared a parallel path in so many ways. You know, both have been repressed, suppressed, demonized, you know, shut out of our mainstream health culture systems, and particularly around motherhood and pregnancy. So you are a very powerful voice and advocate in this area, and I would love for you to share your story, as well as how do you feel we can most support women and our communities in returning to more authentic and natural visions of healing, especially when it comes to the way we give birth and the way we nurture our families.
Big old questions for everyone. Thank you so much for the floor and the mic. And I want to just tip my hat to all the giants that I'm standing on and all these incredible people who have already shared in this incredible platform. I think this is honestly one way that we do that is by platforming each other and creating visibility, and especially not just offering a seat at the table, but welcoming women, mothers, girls, teenagers to build the table and to build spaces on that table, and to not just be assigned their seats, because I think that's what's been largely very comfortable for the paradigm is, okay, we'll let you come and sit, but you're going to sit on our terms, and you're going to sit quietly, and you're going to sit in these ways. So women made, BIPOC made, developed, choreographed, run, assembled spaces are very much needed at this time. Indigenous run spaces are very much needed at this time. Not just attracting women to the psychedelic market because they're just someone to market to, you know, but people that are really here to steer the ship too is very much important. And some ways that I see this happening and not happening, largely within the psychedelic community where it meets like the scientific community. There's a lot of tiptoeing around the incorporation of female bodies within research and within developing research. And so I think that's just an issue kind of science, is like there's just not a huge lean towards the mystery. There's not as much lean towards those things that you cannot calculate with empirical data. And part of that is like the ineffability of pregnancy. And so, you know, we're seeing a crisis right now with the use of SSRIs during pregnancy. We're seeing how outcomes for SSRI use for postpartum depression is not actually yielding the kind of results that people think that it's going to, and is leaving people either in the same position or sometimes even in worse positions with, of course, damage to the fetus and SSRIs moving into breast milk and then going into children, which will eventually lead to adolescent depression. We've already seen this happen. So what are the possible alternatives? And so a lot of mothers, a lot of people that want to give birth are leaning into more earth-based medicines, more natural ways of living in their body, more decolonized ways of living in their body. And that includes having a sovereignty around what they ingest during probably one of the most important co-creative experiences of a person's bodily life, which is to be a pregnant person and to give birth. And so I've received on just the social side some degree of flack for even openly talking about the possibility that cannabis, psilocybin, ayahuasca can be utilized during the pregnancy phase. It is such a delicate place. A lot of people say you should just be less selfish and just wait until the baby is out of your body to decide to abuse yourself. But the science doesn't even back up that psilocybin is causing any degree of harm to developing fetuses. If anything, bringing in more serotogenetic looking, acting, functioning type of neurotransmitters are actually creating a deeper relationship, a deeper communication system between the barrier that the mother has around the child and the child themselves. So there's some really wonderful research and data going on around the effects of psilocybin and serotonin in the gut, and how most of the serotonin in a person's body is actually in the gut and is made very much accessible. The presence of a healthy amount of serotonin in a person's body is actually creating more viable offspring, is creating more communication by way of a neurotransmitter, is a way for mother and baby to communicate minerals, water need, blood need, oxygen need. So if we can create environments that encourage that, then we actually are not just spiritually creating communication, but we are like on the 3D body level, somatically creating more channels of communication. And so by writing pregnant women out of the science, I think we really create this giant gap. We create a big void in what people feel safe to do and what people get shamed for doing. And I think that that's the wrong approach, is like we actually need to press science. We actually need to create the possibility that this is not just safe, but it can also be beneficial. And I'm very much seeing how it can be very beneficial for people. And there's one scientific research that's been done on pregnant rats and psilocybin. And these rats were injected intravenously with straight psilocin and at a very, very high dose. And the fetuses developing in the bodies of these rats were not harmed, were not killed at all. And the concentrations of psilocin were much higher in the mother than in the child. So the placenta did a really wonderful job of creating a barrier and augmenting how much psilocin actually got into the developing fetus. So there's still a lot of unknowns, but I really do believe that if we're going to push the needle forward, that we need to like welcome this possibility of mystery, to not be afraid of nature, to not be afraid of birth, to not be afraid of these really powerful molecules that are creating greater benefits and less harm than what's actually available at this time. And to just wrap it all up, to, you know, that we don't just deserve a seat at the table, but it's very much that we have actually created this reality, which psychedelics have always lived in. will always exist, have always existed. We are the crafters, the curators of experiences. We are cultivators, we are sitters, we are guides, we are mushroom mothers, we are ayahuasca moms, we are mothers that have sat with cannabis and have canna babies. We exist and we're always going to exist. And what the biggest call to the overculture is that we deserve protection. I can't even tell you how many stories of mothers that have reached out to me that their partner who sat in peyote ceremonies with them are now going to the courts and saying this woman is an unfit mother and taking their children away from her. So I'm seeing this happen on the court level, on the state level, on the family level. And so this deep-seated belief that somehow I'm a bad person or I'm causing endangerment for reaching into the earth for assistance for my own mental health and my balance and clarity is so permeated on the family level, the state level, and at the level of the Supreme Court and in the courts. And so we see that the courts actually don't care about bodily agency. That's very much apparent to us now. And so what the largest call is a mass movement to not just destigmatize, but to openly accept, decolonize, indigenize our relationship to the earth and every single molecule on it.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for being so outspoken and such a powerful voice. We know that that comes with a lot of flack, as you put it, and lightning. So thank you. So much gratitude. Yeah. I have another question follow-up with Mikaela. You've been really brave and open in sharing your personal story of having had your femininity been exploited, commodified under the guise of healing, and that's an experience that so many young women share and have lived through and experienced. How do you feel that we can bring the feminine presence into healing spaces at the same time we create safety for all within those spaces?
Women leadership.
Right on.
Mothers in leadership. Also more community containers. I feel very much things can get a little bit sticky within like one-on-one work, even sometimes one practitioner kind of operating, right? And like there's a lot of fragmentation of like who's talking to who. There is a very famous like Bufo various 5-MAO practitioner who has been largely like ostracized and is being like petitioned against to not show up in these spaces because of the harm that he's done. And it's because like all these experiences are like one-on-one, two-on-one, and those communities of people, they've been removed from each other so that they are not sharing this information. But in the kinds of sits that we do in our community, the space can be largely visible to each other. There is a large degree of transparency whenever possible, and a large degree of accountability if something goes astray. And I don't think that's even like a feminine type of personality trait to be open to being wrong and to be accountable. I mean, we're accountable to our kids. Our kids are the ones who call us out for our shit. So we have ceremonies where there are children present. There's like teenagers, there's toddlers, there's infants. And so I think returning family life into ceremony is actually creating this like way that we're working with whole family systems, as opposed to like these individuated experiences where harm can be caused and then they are kind of like written out and no one really knows about what happened. I think increasing visibility and increasing safety can increase the likelihood that you're going to get a benefit optimized space. So women leadership, mothers in leadership, and looking at each other as members of a family, and how we can cause transgressions to each other doesn't necessarily mean that we write you out, but we need to bring you in and we need to call you in and make you accountable for your experiences and welcome you back into our community.
Thank you so much. Becca, I'd leave the slide back over to you. In this moment, our society is more intelligent and technologically efficient than at any time in our history. while collectively we see each and every week, we're collectively more sicker than ever. The absence of listening to or respecting Earth's wisdom, as well as the feminine, have really led us to get way out of balance. And in your personal experience, what has your own personal medicine path taught you about new ways of healing as a people and a planet?
Oh, a lot, so much. I feel called to start by saying that I grew up in a subculture that on the one hand was very queer and supportive of being whoever you want to be and do it yourself, and you want to start a band, make this, do it. And on the other hand was also very masculine and very tough and very could be hyper individualistic, and also in some circles a lot of harm to females and a lot of misogyny. So navigating that as I grew up and realizing just how much internalized misogyny I had, and how much being vulnerable and crying and having feelings was just not okay. And that was both reinforced from childhood and then through teen years and young adult of I'm really, really tough, nothing can get to me, and walling myself off, which I then saw in working in the field as a counselor. And especially I would often facilitate mostly male groups when working with those involved in the court system, and just how much fear there was to express any emotion. So the promise that I see with these medicines and learning to lean into the mystery that Mikaela so eloquently put it, and the feminine and vulnerability and fluidity instead of rigidity, which is where we are now. Everything is so black and white. There's no nuance in a lot of the mental health field, and definitely addiction field. It is very black and white, to the point where even in some circles, being on medication is not okay. And it is only through the strict dogmatic adherence to certain things that you are in fact recovering, and anything else is still defective and problematic. So learning to hold multiple perspectives and multiple feeling states, and learning how to trust our inner healer. Another tenet of 12-step methodology is that you are powerless. You're powerless. You need to just surrender. Your own inherent being is just not powerful enough. And then you sit with these medicines and you realize, oh, wow, I do have power over a lot. I have power over my perspective. I have power over choosing things that deeply resonate with me versus leaving behind things that don't and feel infringed upon myself. So learning how to sit with ambiguity and trust ourselves. I think coming back to trusting our inner healer is going to be hopefully a huge part of the shift in how we approach any sort of mental health suffering or addictive behaviors, because people are dying. People are dying because a large part, people that I've known that have died, feel powerless and feel like, what am I worth? What could I possibly do? I am nothing. So just numb out. And then learning through either plant medicines or other ways of expanded states, or just a holistic paradigm in and of itself, and not a diagnostic paradigm and a symptomology, rather looking at whatever behaviors or perceptions or thought patterns that are causing suffering in someone's life and going deeper into them and piecing them apart and allowing people to come to their own conclusions about certain parts of their being. And certainly medicine helps us get a deep embodied wisdom state of tracing things back to childhood, birth, and beyond. So my hope is that we can allow all of those more fluid approaches and self-trusting approaches, like Mikaela mentioned, decolonizing our minds so that we can feel right in the decisions that we make for themselves and stop blindly turning all of our trust into others to fix me, please fix me. No, let's learn what it means to heal ourselves. So yeah.
Well said. Yes. Thank you. Beautiful. Jean, the female elders in our society possess so much powerful wisdom and deep experience and are the least listened to in our society. How can we as women come together across our maiden, mother, crone years to share, to learn, and receive this wisdom across the generations?
You couldn't be more right. I'm 63, definitely raised in a generation where, not only were girls not as important, but, it was the whole seen and not heard. So my whole youth was, no one ever asked me what I thought about anything. And that gets deeply embedded. So that as I grew older and moved into the world, I just assumed no one wanted to hear what I had to say. And it's so sad and such a shame. And then I get into the corporate world. I worked in biotech, and I'd be in these meetings with these scientists and PhDs, and they'd be stressing over what happened to this, whatever the latest batch of, medicine we were creating. And I'm thinking, well, surely they've thought of this and surely they've thought of that. And I wouldn't speak up. And it'd be 2 weeks later, they're like, oh yeah, this is what went wrong. And I'm like, God, really? They didn't even think of that? And why didn't I say something? And so my experience moving through the medicine work and kind of emerging on this other side, my local practice ground is with my primary relationship. I mentioned educating my husband. It's fun. It's funny sometimes. And it's also really infuriating sometimes to see how much of my voice I have denied. And now that I'm speaking up, I can see in this very small paradigm, I'm changing all the rules. And even though I have a very willing, open-minded, loving partner, he's still, he was an executive at a high-tech company. He's an apex white male. He's good looking. He's strong. He's educated, Midwestern. Like, this is kind of who's running things, right? And so even if I have an open-minded version of the guys who are running things, and I can see every time I speak up, every time I challenge him, every time I use my voice, I get a little bit of blowback. This is in microcosm of what's happening in the larger society. And I stress over it. I journal over it. I talk to Robin about it. I'm like, oh, how do we move through this? And I think the only answer is we just keep talking. When my early yoga teacher would talk about, I've learned Yin Yoga, which is this beautiful practice of dropping deeply into long held stretching shapes, and then just resting as well as we can with the discomforts that arise in the body and the irritabilities that arise, our feelings that arise. And can we just open to include all that? And she would say, we don't have to fix and we don't have to abandon. And so this has become my mantra, not just with my husband, but with my voice in all these arenas. I'm not going to be able to fix everything, and I don't want to give up. And so I think we just keep talking. We just keep creating women's circles. We just keep talking. I will talk to anybody. I will talk to women in the locker room at the JCC. We're changing out of our swim clothes and what a beautiful day and this and that and how are you doing? And before you know it, I'm talking about my medicine journey. So in the grocery store, anywhere at all, I'm talking about, hey, you know what? I did this thing and it worked for me. And in ones and twos, we have friends following us down this path. And I think that's the best we can do. I don't have a big bullhorn. Some people have larger platforms. I don't have a big platform. I'm still feel fairly new to this, but I think we just keep talking about it. We just keep reaching out and talking about it. We create, as Mikaela said, venues. We've got the women's circle. We started a deep dive circle. I don't know what else. There's so many circles that we can start, but I think we just need to keep talking, and we're going to get the blowback. Don't take it personally. This is generational, it's cultural, it's sociological, it's patriarchal. I was going to drop an F-bomb. That we just got to keep talking.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Robin. So it's no coincidence that earth medicines are reemerging in modern society at the very same time we're having a rising tide of more feminine voices and earth-based healing happening across the country and around the world. How do you believe and envision female visions and voices and leadership will help birth a new culture and world?
Well, sounds like that's the question. That's the hot question. How is it going to change the world? It's all about perspective. You know, we do these psychedelic medicines to change our consciousness. You know, these are consciousness expanding practices, and that is primary in my mind to making changes on the fundamental level. Now, that's not that is across the board for men and women and everybody in between. And what I see as particularly important for women is touching on what Jean was saying, is that using our voices and gaining strength from each other and gathering in groups and gathering together in community and raising our children together and educating each other and lifting each other up. By lifting each other up as women, we lift the world, and that the current paradigm tears us down. And so again, we lift up, we pull from the ashes and we make something beautiful. So as women, we see the inherent beauty of the earth, and we have a direct connection with the earth's rhythms and the rhythm of the moon, and people that identify as women as well. We understand there's this spark of life force, and it's that life force that is going to make the changes. That the patriarchy, you guys, you nailed it. You got patriarchy down. You got 5,000 years to check it out and to hone it and destroy everything. And guess what? It works. Great. Now let's build from these ashes. Let's build from this rubble, great beauty and essence of life. And that is something I think women really, truly understand. And again, we've been divided. And again, we can come together, and people like Mikaela and Becca and Jean and you, Casey, and so many more of the women that are speaking in this conference this weekend understand that coming together, unity, oneness, heart. You know, men, I do not want to tear men down. I mean, my God, these poor bastards got convinced to be the oppressors. How horrible that must be. But what, men think with their heads and they think with their other little heads. And women, we think with our uteruses and we think with our hearts. And so that difference and that change, in my perspective, is the difference. And that is what is going to change the world is women coming together, standing together, and moving from our hearts.
And
Thank you.
can I add, Casey, to just kind of piggyback on what Robin is saying? 2 points. We know that women are the ones who initiate transformational change in our families, in our communities. I've seen it, I've done it, right? And as Robin says, the poor bastards, they were never invited into the conversation about how do you feel?
Yeah.
You know, where are the tears? Let's bring on the tears. What does that feel like? They were not invited. They don't have the language. They don't have the emotional bandwidth. And so as women, as we're speaking and as we're building community, I'd say let's just invite the men into the room as well. Invite them into the conversation. Invite them into the goddess wisdom that we have and that they have. It's available to them.
Yeah.
Let's open the conversation to make it inviting and exciting and something that men can see, like, I'd rather have that than what we've got.
Right.
I just wanted to make those points.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I want to open it up to if anybody has any questions, to please feel free to place your questions in the chat at this time. I just have one more question. This is for all of you. You know, a lot of us, our work today in the world is a direct reflection of the guidance and support that we wish we had when we were younger. And so many young people, in my experience, are coming to these medicines right now and this path right now. And the youngest generation has so much more in front of them than we have ever had in any previous generation alive on the planet. So if any of you can speak to, you know, envisioning new systems and how we can best support younger people and the youngest generations who are getting this work and give them what we saw we may not have received, but we're there to support now. So Mikaela, Becca, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
So what is so much needed is a conversation with young people and mentorship with young people around coming into their body in a way that I think, as Becca was alluding to, increases development of their own intuitive sense for what feels right and good. And also understanding, of course, the mystery, and also what on a physiological level is happening. A lot of young people who bleed are turned into the chemically incarcerated when they're put on birth control really early. And I think that's actually a first step into the pharmaceutical stronghold that then I think follows a young person's life into adulthood and into later adulthood. And so organizing spaces where young people can come and ask questions about body, about plant medicine, about, I mean, it's like taking high school life skills, but like flipping it all the way inside out and doing it completely differently, and welcoming young people into entheogen space. Whenever I come to these conferences, like, there's not enough teenagers, there's not enough young people, there's not enough toddlers. And as a mother, like, has to separate me from my family in order to pursue this arena and this work. So I think one of the most wonderful things we can do is to bring young people into this space so that they can open their minds, open their body, open their spirit to this other way of living, that the world doesn't have to be a toxic place to live, that not just in this feminine sense, but also in this like earth first sense that all people deserve to live, whether you are disabled or Black or queer or whatever it is. that everyone deserves to be here, that every animal deserves to be here. Like not one plant is better than another plant, that, you know, we can return to this childlike way. I think that's honestly what's missing, is that childlike presence within entheogens. And the only way you can weave that is by bringing them in and learning from children, as opposed to being like, here, I'm here to teach you all the time. So like, no, like this psychedelic space needs to learn like from the kids, like how to be. And not only that, but, you know, I had a womb mentor, I had a mentor, a Black woman who's also Indigenous, kind of like hold my hand and guide me into the mysteries of the womb. And so, you know, having practitioners around you that look like you, that feel like you, that feel safe and comfortable, and are willing to endow you with like the knowledge and the initiation to these mysteries is, I think, an ancient rite that is now being largely this matriarchal, from mother, you know, grandmother to mother to child to granddaughter, has been kind of broken up a little bit, this like mitochondrial DNA sharing of information. And I think it's so epigenetic, it's so in the DNA. And I think it's a wonderful way to bring and serve the younger community, is to just honestly bring them in and offer selfless service to young people.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And give them a voice. Again, you know, listen to the wisdom of the youth, listen to playful like nature. You know, people just take things so seriously. And there are some things that do require a serious nature, you know, and when approaching with a beginner's mind, we, you know, level the playing field a little bit. And when we can remember our playful natures, then we bring laughter and joy into a space. And that is something that we have robbed our children of, is that honoring that by, you know, making them work harder and putting more structure and anyway, that's a whole nother subject. Yeah. Giving the youth a voice, I think, is another way to really support empowerment for making change.
Thank you. Becca, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. Parallel to what Mikaela mentioned about getting them into their bodies. I have an 11-year-old and an almost 6-year-old, and much of my 11-year-old's life outside of school takes place on a screen, right? That's where they communicate with their friends. So I've noticed a concerted effort on my part, especially the more I grow with these medicines, to connect them to the earth and connect them to their senses and reconnect them to what it means to listen to, is their body hungry? Does their body need movement? Do they need a nap, right? And this is like younger children, but as far as teens and young adults, some of whom come to the Psychedelics in Recovery meeting that I've been a part of for over 2 years, come in with something that I can relate to, just a general sense of distaste for what they see largely in front of them in the world, and a feeling of disconnection from spirit and to what it means to be connected to the unseen, to the mystery, and feeling a sense of hope, feeling a sense that they matter and that something that they can do can benefit the greater good, instead of having all of the general culture and the roles of society just fed to them, right? Feeling safe in using their imagination to get outside of capitalism and to get outside of, what am I going to do that's going to make me the most money so I can survive in this apocalyptic hellhole, right? That's kind of the vibe that I get from many young people. And, you know, being an elder millennial, I guess is what I would be called. There's a large chunk of like, I don't know, like we're all making this together. And my hope is that these medicines can again go back to the empowerment and the feeling of agency that they very much hold the keys. Everyone has their own key to moving humanity forwards and connecting to the earth and to each other, instead of the disconnect and hyper individualism that is so rampant right now.
So true, Becca. I want to bring it back to the family level again, too. So I started having kids a little later. My daughters are in their early 20s, and I was blessed with daughters. I have one daughter who's been playing with psychedelics since she was quite young, and I believe they healed her way before I ever found these medicines. I have another daughter who, no. But when I started this journey, I was really open with both of them about what I was up to. And the one daughter was like right on, and the other daughter's like, you're crazy. But I do believe that every parent who can become healed and find their way to this work and to this way of viewing the world and this way of parenting is just another child or handful of children who will grow up with a greater awareness of what's possible around just being happy and finding beauty in the world and opening to, there's just so much that's hard and terrorizing and feels futile, but there's also so much that is glorious and magnificent and miraculous. And so the more that parents can open to that and share that with the children, then the more the children are going to be open to that, whether or not they ever take psychedelics. And so we always say in our circles, every person who comes to the medicine and has any degree of healing, that's a drop in the pond. And we open that out and out and out and include everyone. And I also think it's really important for people of my generation to say to everyone younger than us, we're really sorry. I feel really sorry. I'm sorry for all the shit that we've done to the environment. I'm sorry we didn't make things better for you. And we have a lot of hope.
Thank you. Beautiful. So thank you all so much to everybody in the chat. Thank you for all your kind, thoughtful comments and kindness. We really appreciate it. All of these women here are really available for all of you. So I know Jean and Robin, you can find them regularly in the TAM Integration Women's Circles weekly. Becca Evans, you can find at mycophoria.org. And Mikaela's work, and she has a really rich, resource-rich website at Mystic Jasper, right? Is that the best place to find you? Beautiful. So I'd love to turn it back over to Robin to close us out and thank everybody for being here.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. I am feeling called to sing a brief Ikaro to close us today. This is an Ikaro honoring Mother Earth, our greatest teacher and wisdom keeper. I learned this one from my maestra in Jaén, Peru, Maria Cristina, and I'm very thankful for all that she has brought into my life and the connection she has strengthened in me between the earth and myself. Pachamama mujana pi you your inches mama tai tai wasn't just a yon Munes kanchis kaisan chista Pachamama muchana pi you your inches mama tai tai Wasan chista yun chista. Munes kanchis kai sainen chista. Ah, 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 Thank you, all you beautiful sacred beings, for all the work that you do for yourselves. As you do your work, you are healing me. And I really appreciate that a whole lot. And you're healing our beautiful Mother Earth with your glorious, loving nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey, so much for moderating today. We really appreciate it. Appreciate all the effort that you put into getting to know each one of us on the panel and helping us speak to what we are passionate about and creating this beautiful little community this morning. Thank you to everyone who attended. So grateful.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, and enjoy. There's a beautiful, beautiful next couple days ahead. So thank you all for being here. And yeah, reach out to all of us if we can support you.
Be well.
Bye-bye.